to Everything's Cleaner in Texas, the show where we spotlight the people, processes, and products that are helping Texas clean freaks fight dirty better. From hospital sterilization teams to cutting-edge technology, from deep cleaning secrets to industry game changers, if it's making Texas fight dirty, we're going to talk about it on this show. My name's Hank Balch, alongside Dusty Glass, and every episode we'll be diving deep with the experts, innovators, and frontline fighters who are setting the gold standard for cleanliness across the Lone Star State. Because in Texas, we don't just fight dirty, we do it big. So grab your boots, buckle up, it's time to get clean. Hey there, Sterile Processing Universe. My name is Hank Balch. I'm here in studio with Dusty Glass, and you are listening to Everything's Cleaner in Texas, a podcast of the HSPPA group in Houston, Texas. And this is a podcast not only for Houston, not only for Texas, but Dusty, it's really a podcast for the entire industry. And today we've got a special guest in studio with us as well, Ron Hunsucker. He's a clinical education specialist for HealthMark, a Gettinga company. And Ron, if you've been in Texas, if you've been working in Texas for any amount of time, you probably come across Ron once or twice out there on the range. Ron, we're really excited to have you with us today.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
All right. So, Dusty, kind of cast the vision here. I know we've talked about the agenda for the series that we've launched out here. We wanted to talk to a lot of different folks on a lot of different kinds of topics. But what in particular put Ron on your radar? Why'd you want to talk to him, and what do you want to cover today?
Yeah, thanks, Hank. I mean, I think the main thing is that you want to kind of capture different aspects from all different areas, all different walks of life, people who have been doing this for a long time, people who have been doing this for, a decent amount of time, people who are just starting. You also want to capture folks who are, have seen what it is to work in large facilities, small facilities, and medium-sized facilities, and kind of what it takes to deal and manage and the problems that they run into, because each one of their problems are unique and they're there and they're very real. So having someone with the experience that Ron has and being able to have put boots on ground in some of these facilities is really special, and really excited to have him as a guest.
Great. Well, I know folks can't see us here because we're audio show, but, Ron's got his cowboy hat on. Dusty doesn't. I won't say he usually does, but he does when I see him. You almost always have a cowboy hat on, seems like. So, we got a trio of some Westerns here. Now, I don't typically dress Western too much these days. I've always got a pair of boots on no matter what. But outside of that, I'm pretty kind of, metroed out. I guess I've been living in the city too long, but I still got the accent. So, there's that. So, Ron, let's start at the beginning for you, buddy. How'd you get into healthcare? And kind of take us back, to those early days once you got started into the sterile processing journey, and then we'll kind of pick up the story from there.
Well, back in 1970, no, just kidding. No, I actually started in Central Sterile Services back in 1979. I got into healthcare because my father ran the print shop at that facility. All my sister, basically my whole family had gone to work at this facility, and it was a Christian's facility in San Antonio. After a couple of years in Central Service, I started questioning why we were doing stuff, because back then this is what we do it. It was never an explanation why we did it, or, why were we running to Bowie Dick? What the heck is it? Nobody ever told us, so I got curious. I found out about the certification program from Purdue University at the time, and I took that course back in 1984, and I got certified. Yeah. Keep picking on the age.
That's the year I was born, Ron. 1984 sticks out. Like, there's a lot of other years I'd be like, okay, whatever. But when someone says 1984, my ears perk up because I was like, okay, that's my birthday. Let's keep going.
Thanks, Hank.
Is it sad that I wasn't here yet, Ron?
It just keeps getting worse for you, Ron.
Oh, hey, I've got some open wounds from the tractor. Y'all want to put some salt on?
Okay. Anyways, 1984, Ron's taking this test from Purdue. Okay. Go ahead. Pick up on it.
and I actually, once I got certified, they made me a manager. And I went from one manager position to another manager position. And I was finally hired by an RN that had come to a facility. He never ran a sterile processing before. And I told him I was certified. He said, come work for me. And I actually started part-time for him. That lasted about 2 weeks. And then I was full-time.
Okay.
And,
I was like, it lasted 2 weeks. Why, Ron?
So I went straight to full-time because he wanted to create a certification program for the staff. So we actually had the first fully certified staff. And then back then it was NICSPDA, National Institute for Certification of, oh my goodness, Central Service Sterile. It was NICSPDA.
That's right. We'll fact check you later. Okay. Yeah.
It was Nancy Chobin's very first organization.
Okay. Great.
Okay. We were the first all certified facility in San Antonio, period. But at the time, I was only one of two certified people from Purdue. But that was back in the 80s, Times have changed. After I was manager up until 2018. And then I went into sales. But in sales, I got to go around and help people and consult in sterile processing. And I started out at some pretty small places. We go down to Mission, Texas, Brownsville, Weslaco, and all these little places, Laredo. And I was amazed at what they didn't know, but I was also amazed about how quick they were to grasp it and to jump on board with infection control policies and why we do what we do. And they wanted more education. And that's what a lot of our problem is in sterile processing is we don't educate enough. Even at the small facilities I've seen, they're doing Da Vinci cases. Real small facilities, maybe 6 ORs. They're doing orthopedic cases. Now they're doing more orthopedic cases in ASCs than they're doing in hospitals. Even spine, ortho spine all the time in ASCs. And the guys in the ASC are going, I've never seen these instruments before, but they have to be trained on how to properly clean them. And it's usually up to the rep to go in there and train them. You guys know 9 times out of 10, the rep's not going to do that. So
yeah, we've had those conversations.
Yeah. So then it's up to us.
Or if they do, it's not good education sometimes either. So
just get clean. Yeah, just get clean. But y'all come from a time where we'd be getting an instrument out of the washer and blood would be coming out, or blown, or tissue, because it wasn't cleaned properly on the decontam side.
So, Ron, let me ask you then kind of geographically then here in Texas. So you spent most of your sterile processing time there in San Antonio, which is kind of the edge of South Texas, right? Like if you go just north of San Antonio, you're kind of in the hill country still. If you get San Antonio, like you're not really South Texas, but that's kind of where it starts getting South Texas. So just like your kind of geographical exposure, did you spend most of your time in that kind of border region, South Texas region? Like how much time have you spent up north, East Texas, out that way?
Well, since I left in 2008 is when I gave up my manager position in sterile processing. And since then, I've been all the way up to Fort Worth. And that's about as far north as I go, or as I used to go as a salesman, because that was my territory. But I was blessed to be able to not only sell, but also teach at the same time. A lot of South Texas.
Yeah.
Some Central Texas.
It's a big old state. If you're not from Texas, or if you hadn't spent a lot of time driving Texas, it's really difficult to explain how long it takes you to get from point A to point B sometimes. It's one thing if you're going up I-35, kind of north and south the interstate between San Antonio and Fort Worth, for instance. But even that, even though it's a straight shot, the traffic sometimes, the construction sometimes, it's even slower than it is sometimes taking some of the back roads. And I think I bring that up and I want to highlight that, as we're talking about this podcast for Texas, that when we have conversations, just like you said, Ron, about how we're supported in the state, if it's a sales rep, if it's a service rep, the territories and the coverage, it's one thing if you got the whole state of Delaware or the whole state of Connecticut is your territory. If you got the whole state of Texas, I mean, that's a whole other ballgame, right? And I think there's implications there. Maybe we can talk about that here in a moment. Dusty, I didn't really ask you this. I guess we talked about this on episode 1 a little bit, but you spent most of your sterile processing time in Texas, in Houston. Is that right? Kind of southeast Texas?
Yep, Houston.
Okay. And yeah, my experience has been really, San Antonio was where I was a leader. And then I'm out here in College Station these days, but not active in a sterile processing department out here. And then I'm originally from Austin. So my geography is a little broader, kind of like you, Ron. Like I've been around a lot, but not necessarily in these different departments as a leader. So, part of the show, I'm looking forward to talking to folks around the state of Texas that have led in these areas, hearing about some of these dynamics and different challenges that you brought up. But Ron, I wanted to ask you, before we leave your life story portion of this, your shout out about, the 1980 certification. That's a big deal. Like, I know you just kind of said that offhand, but I want to bring that back up, that it was a big deal when I was a manager in 2013 to get your department certified. Like it was still a big deal in 2013. And you're talking about the 1980s that you had your department certified, like you're pursuing certification. Part of that dynamic is like, awesome, man, like y'all are doing that in the 80s, but then it's also kind of sad. It's like, oh man, we're still trying to do this in like the 2020s. Like, what's the disconnect? Why is it taking so long for us to get this enculturated?
It's old school, Hank. I mean, people still think sterile processing is just dishwashers. They still do. I'm sorry. They still do.
We know that.
Yeah, I had a person that I respected very much. And one day he said, SPD, those stupid people downstairs. And I about tore his head off. But I didn't touch him. I had constraint. But I mean, that's what it is. It's people don't understand how much goes into sterile processing, how much they actually do, how many processes we have to follow in order to make sure that the patient's safe. I mean, we all have our specialties. For me, a hospital is a family. We're all a group. We're all there for one darn reason. Take care of the patient, period. And it takes a team all the way from EVS, plan ops, the hospital, period. It takes everybody in that hospital to keep patients safe, period. And we are just, we are the backbone. We are the first line of defense, I like to say, for any kind of infection. The SPD is the first line of defense, period. And it's hard getting that across. But I could tell you some of the smaller places that I used to go to were quick way to grasp on. Back in 90, when I went to work for that RN and we made our staff all get certified, we made a course for the whole system so everybody could take it. We also started the first South Texas Sterile Processing Society. And I told you about that when you came down here. And then it dissolved because I left, because I went into sales. But when I did that, and we had our first meeting, and I called all around Texas, and people came from Austin, they came from Brownsville, Corpus Christi, Houston, they came from everywhere. And we're talking about certification because we didn't know there was a certification. And this was in the 90s, like you say. It still hasn't caught on, I mean, Nancy did a great job in Rhode Island, where you have to be certified to work in sterile processing. And I think eventually we need people on the Hill to fight for, it's like Ms. Green said, plumbers are certified. We're the people that take care of the instruments that go inside the patients. Shouldn't we be certified and recognized as well? It's the old fight. I've been fighting that fight for 40 years.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you bringing up to go back to episode 1 and even episode 2. We talked about the Houston Medical Complex there, like the medical center down there, and just the vision, like the forward, future-facing, innovative, deeply historical. Like they're tied to game-changing technologies and innovators, and like heroes of the healthcare industry, not only in Texas but around the globe. And then to your point, Ron, like once you kind of get out to the smaller areas, like the smaller towns and cities, these surgery centers, these smaller hospital, critical access hospitals, you get down, like, not even like, it's not a north, south, east, west thing, because I think no matter where you go in Texas, if you get far enough away from the city, you're going to start seeing the same things no matter where you're at. But then also, that some of these things that we're trying to do in the 2020s, 2024, 2025, like, restart a chapter there in Houston, like Dusty and his team have done. Those are big projects that need to happen. But your point in your story about the San Antonio chapter, it's not that they've never happened before. It's that they've happened, they've been launched, they had a run, like, however long that run was. And then something happened along the way where that momentum stalled. And Dusty, I'm kind of curious too, because I know, like, you're in the throes of this, right? You just relaunched a chapter there in Houston. The conversations that you had, kind of like what you're building upon, because many of the people that were part of the previous chapter in Houston, I'm assuming they're still in Houston, may still be working in the same positions that they were. They may even be involved in this new chapter. But what has the conversation been like to learn the lessons, I guess, from what happened in the past, but then to build on that, as we look forward to this new chapter?
Yeah, I think kind of to what you were saying is the key, especially for the Houston chapter, is that a lot of people, they move, they get promoted, they move out of, that area, they get into a different area. Well, they were maybe the leaders of that, of that chapter, and they didn't have anybody to kind of take that mantle up. And once you get, when you're in a place like Houston that, has the meccas of healthcare that you have, when you do a good job, people know your name, and they want to, they kind of want to go, hey, you know what? I want you, and so they kind of get pulled away. And unfortunately, it kind of hurts, the normal technicians that want to, be a part of the chapter. I think we have a huge following of people who are interested and that want to be involved. But I think that unlike, Ron, who has been here, since the beginning,
in the beginning, there was Ron.
Yes. Here in Houston, there's a lot of folks, there's a lot of movement. And, for me, I'm kind of in a special place in my life where, I feel like, hey, I'm going to be here. And I didn't take, this mantle up lightly because I wanted it to mean something. Me and Ron had conversations, personally. And, I told him, I said, my family, we've moved around a lot. I've been to a lot of places like we talked about in chapter 1. I had to really prove myself. I had to travel a lot. I had to get my name out there. Really had to prove what I could do in sterile processing. So when I finally had a place to call home, I said, you know what, this is where I want to settle down for at least until my girls are out of school, they're off in college, and I want to have something that, I can leave my mark on. And I kind of say, hey, you know what, I was a part of something bigger. And one of the big hospitals I started off in, it's a flagship of one of the largest medical providers in the U.S. I was the second person to be certified. That wasn't long ago. But even to that point, certification wasn't taken seriously. And I think that, you look at the people who take it seriously, let's see where they are 10, 15 years down the road. And I think compared to the folks who are not certified, you'll see a drastic change in where they end up.
Yeah. It's that level of commitment is a big part of that, because that's a signal to yourself, but also to your coworkers, to your family and everything, that I'm serious about this career, that it's not just a job like we've talked about elsewise. And, but, you brought something up, Dusty, and I want to throw this over to you, Ron, because it's a really important point on the stability of leadership in these chapters for success. I'm speaking as one that I've started 2 chapters in 2 different states. And then within a couple of years of starting those chapters, I ended up moving out of state, right? So I'm the example, one of the examples that Dusty is saying of that's really hard on a new chapter, especially. It's hard enough to lose a chapter leader, that's an established chapter. You've had leaders before, you've had leaders after, no big deal, but it's still hard. But if it's a new chapter launch, there's all the excitement, all the momentum, and then you get that chapter leader leave and kind of create that vacancy can really be difficult. But that's not even my question, Ron. My question is, the same is true for departments. I know you've seen this up close. So what's the impact at the department level on losing your leader? What does that do to the team? How have you seen that impact the culture in all the different departments that you've been a partner with through the years?
Every department I've been in, it usually took me at least 5 years to get in a managerial position. But I was usually put into a managerial position because somebody left. But the person that left groomed me, taught me, like I taught the RN sterile processing. He taught me about working with people and talking to people and treating your staff, and it's a team, and you need your team to tell you what they want to do and what the changes they want to make. And that's the important thing is groom somebody can replace you, but also at the same time, keep your team with you and behind you, because they're the ones that do the grunt work, just like we used to do. We were the ones that decontamined for hours, changing scrubs, getting in the process, right? We did it for hours. I used to climb inside sterilizers and wash those too. But, those were the days. But it's all about having the proper leadership to be able to pay it forward. I believe in paying it forward. And I'm proud to say a lot of the people that work for me now run departments, and it's good to see.
Do you see, Ron, comparing maybe the last 20 years, right? Since 2024 right now, as the last 20 years was like 2004 to the present day to the previous 20 years. So 1984 to 2004, let's kind of break it up into that kind of 220s for 40-year time span. Do you see leadership turnover happening quicker today and more often? Like when you're talking to facilities, if it's surgery centers, if it's ambulatory, if it's like the big level 1 trauma, the academics, like the Houston Med Center, are you seeing that leadership turnover in a more rapid pace today in the last 20 years? Or has it just kind of been, that's the thing, like people in this position, they just kind of churn?
It all depends on the person they put in that position, Hank. Unfortunately, and I've seen this a lot of places, there's an RN that's getting ready to retire. Okay, she can't stand at the table anymore. She can't be the runner up in the OR anymore. Oh, the manager of SPD is gone. You want that position? They put her down there. She doesn't know. It's the staff that's doing everything. And all she can do is, of course, she was an RN. She supports her staff, but she doesn't know why they're doing what they're doing either until she gets certified. And that happens a lot. Some people I've seen, they'll get certified and they'll go off and what do they call
like traveling, interim management and stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They'll go traveling, and 9 times out of 10, they all come back. They had me in Montana and it was 20 below. So I came back to Texas.
Yeah. So, I mean, that point is well taken, though. It depends on the person that you're putting in. If they're already on their way out for retirement, and like, I know that sounds like a random kind of scenario, but I'm telling you, I have seen that more than once in my career. That it's seen kind of as an easy a department manager role compared to other manager roles, maybe in perioperative service. And to your other point, Ron, if you got a good enough team on the front lines, they can get through with a leader that doesn't necessarily know as much as they could or they should about the department. And so, we get in those scenarios where it's kind of a retirement program for 2 years and then they're churning. But then, Dusty, you brought up a really important point that just as we're talking about the size difference of these facilities out there in the state, it is very common if you're kind of looking at a career ladder trajectory, to view it as I'm stair-stepping my way up from like maybe a surgery center, like a 200-bed hospital. In my next, I'm going to the 500 bed. And then I'm going to go to the 800 bed. And then I'm going to go to 1,000 and 1,200. And then I'm going to go to Houston Medical Center and I'm going to be at the top. And we say at the top, but then to your other point, there's other facilities that may not be larger than the ones in the Houston Med Center, but they're all over the country. And they're willing to pay top dollar for someone they feel like has now got that premium level of experience. So how do we mitigate that? Like, that's not all a bad thing. Career growth is a good thing that we want to support, but it's a hard thing for chapter leadership, and it's definitely a hard thing for the medical center if your best and brightest are just there kind of passing through, right?
I think that it's kind of the old adage I've heard, and maybe y'all have heard it, the grass is always greener on the other side. I've always heard, my good friends they that are close to me, they say, the grass is greener where you water it. The more that I'm here in Houston and the more that I'm in Texas, the more this rings true to me, that it really matters on, are you investing in where you're at? And you, not only as a leader, but into your team, into succession plans like Ron, spoke about. How invested are you, or are you looking forward to the next grass patch, right? Are you looking forward to something else, or are you focusing on where you're at, and all of those other things will handle themselves?
Right. Yeah, I've heard the quote. I want to say it was by a guy named Jim Elliott. He said, wherever you are, be all there. Very similar to, right, like the grass is greener where you water it. And I think no matter, like, sometimes you just don't know if there's going to be an opportunity that comes. Like, it's one thing to be looking for it and know, like, I'm going to be here for 2 years and then I'm going to start applying for the next job. It's another thing to be planning, kind of like Ron's story, right? Like, where you got your head down, Ron, you're doing a good job, you're committed to this team. And because you're doing such a good job, then people just naturally kind of come to you and be like, hey, there's this opportunity here. We know that you're a great candidate and I want you to at least consider this. Like, that's a whole nother scenario. Not to say one's better than the other, but it's a different dynamic for the timing wise, as Dusty brought up. I want to ask you, Ron, I know we've kind of run quickly through our time here today, but I do have one more question specific again on the dynamics across our state that I think you're going to have a potentially interesting insight on because you've seen these changes. Everybody knows this is true across the country, but a lot of our hospitals today, the independent standalone hospital is getting more and more rare. They're all kind of being gobbled up by these larger health systems. They're being standardized and branded and all those kind of things that happen, just modern healthcare. In the state of Texas, there's a growing number of large systems, like, the big ones that come to mind, Baylor, Scott and White's out there, CHI, you got your Texas Health stuff. Of course, you got Memorial Hermann. No surprise there, right? And there's a bunch of them, but they're big and they're growing, and that's the trajectory. So how are you seeing that, Ron, change just the ground level sterile processing experience in Texas today? Is this, in general, is it a good thing? Like, has it caused any challenges? Like, what do you see any trends that are popping up specifically because now it's not just the hospital in Killeen that's making the decision. It's the mothership in Temple that's telling Killeen what to do now.
Yeah. Isn't that always fun?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I can tell you, sometimes the people making the decision should not be making the decisions.
Okay. Yeah.
And as I said earlier,
it goes back to leadership, right?
Yeah. And leadership and listening to your team, right? And when big corporations make that decision, have they talked to anybody in the team that's actually down in the grassroots? Lately, what I've been seeing is infection control is getting a lot more involved than they used to. So there's 4 facilities actually MD Anderson, UT Health are teaming up, and they've opened an ASC, a couple of cancer research. They're building one down in Edinburgh, Texas. They built an ASC down there. But the first thing I got a call from was their infection control person. Okay, come in, help me, tell me what we need to do. And when you get that kind of ground control from the bottom up, that's a lot of help. And I love to see that. I mean, I promote infection control, joining sterile processing every day. And I know I've got a few of them on my chapter, and I belong to their chapter. We have to work together to make all the patients safe. So that's a good thing I'm seeing. Bad thing is, like you said, when corporations make decisions like, oh, we're going to go all sterile, but they don't look at all. They don't know. They've never been in sterile processing. How can they make a decision for sterile processing? And Dusty, you've dealt with this. Hank, I know you dealt with it.
Right. Yep. Like even smaller systems, even if it's just like a little 3-hospital system, like what I was director of there in San Antonio, that point's well taken is you can't make decisions that impact departments that you don't have a good pulse on just because it looks good on paper or just because the contract says X, Y, and Z. Dusty, were you about to say something?
Well, I just was kind of wanted to dig into something with, what Ron was saying. Do you really see with these budget limitations from smaller hospitals to bigger hospitals, do you see that affecting the sterile processing as a whole, like the quality of that care that's being rendered there?
A lot of times it depends on who's the administrator there. A lot of these smaller facilities are usually administrators that came from the OR, not the C-suite. So they know who to call. Like you say, Dusty, people know to call you. In San Antonio, people knew to call me. That's just the way it was. But you have to learn how to do your justifications and your capital expenditure request, and you have to be able to tie that into patient care, and we're going to get this much more. And, you've done justifications before. They're long, they're lengthy, and then you have to go through the CNO to the CEO to the CFO and go through each step and take it. If you can hand carry it, it always works better. But I've seen smaller facilities buy stuff bigger facilities haven't bought it. So, because they're ready to keep their patients safe. They don't have so many other people telling them what to do. I can name some corporations, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, let's not do that. That's on the after hours show, Ron. We haven't started launching that one yet. But, to your point, Ron, I think great kind of to bookend, really to this whole episode, because you started the episode kind of talking about your background, and as you got out, to these independent facilities that just felt like they missed the boat on infection, like on regulatory compliance, training, technology, you name it. They were just kind of living in a bubble. That's still happening today, but it's more rare because of these system dynamics that we're just talking about. If you get good leadership, especially at the sterile processing director system level or system educator level, man, oh man, I can reach those outlying facilities, if they're clinics, if they're ambulatory surgery, if they're just if they used to be independent standalone hospitals, but now they're part of the system, to start standardizing in a good way. And it's not like everything's cookie cutter, down from top. There's all kinds of nuances. You got staff culture at play. You got different equipment manufacturers, you name it. But the upside is finally we've got some people that can be proactive, just like your story said. Hey, if we got new construction, let's not wait until the thing's already built to start engaging IP and SPD leaders. Let's do it now before that in the planning stage. And I think that's a really, really encouraging trend here. Before we wrap, I know you alluded to, Ron, there's a San Antonio chapter that's up and going these days. I had a small part to play in that back in 2016 or so. But, you've been running that. You've been a big part of that, since I left San Antonio back in 2018. or 2019, I guess. What is the information about your San Antonio chapter? And then Dusty, I'll let you wrap the show here talking about what's going on down in Houston.
Well, we're called the South Texas Association of Sterile Processing Services, STAPS, and a friend of mine made that up. Actually, it was a group effort it was a team effort, as I recall.
Yeah, that's kind of the Winkler thing. If I remember right, that was kind of, those VA guys and their SPSs. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And we have chapter meetings, but our chapter is so spread out that sometimes my chapter meeting is just in Brownsville. Sometimes my chapter meeting is just in San Antonio. I do what I can. When I have my board meetings now, it's usually Zoom. Managers don't have time to leave their departments anymore. We're also firemen. Come on, we got to put the fires out, and you can't do that if you're not at the facility. So keeping it going.
Website or how do people get a hold of you if they want
to? They can always call me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on the HealthMark website as well. So
yeah, we'll put your contact info. We'll put your LinkedIn page and stuff in the show notes so people can reach out if you're in that South Texas area. Because again, if you're too far south, you're not going to want to drive to Houston, but you could potentially, depending on where those chapter meetings are that Ron's talking about, you maybe drive to San Antonio. If you're way down in the valley, you could do something down there in Brownsville, etc. So, yeah, that's great, Ron. And then Dusty. I know we talk about it every episode because this is the purpose of the podcast here, but what's going on down in Houston? Talk to us about the chapter.
Yeah, absolutely, Hank. So you can always find everything that's going on with the Houston Sterile Processing Professionals Alliance at www.hsppachapter.com. From there, you can get all of our Facebook, Twitter, or X, Sterile Works is linked on there as well. And we're also, every time that we are doing any kind of education, videos, stuff like that, we will link all those things to the website, sponsors, all of those things will be found there. And we will soon be putting all of our chapter meetings. We already have all of our bylaws, everything on there. You can read all that we're about, everything that we want to do, who's on the board, and just find a way to get plugged in, and we'd love to have you if you're in the Houston area.
And, to kind of tie this all together, put a bow on it, we'd love to have you for the long term. We want to create a whole lot of Ron Hunsuckers out there that come in the industry and they stay in the industry for 40 years. And that's the way that you build a legacy in your department, in your region, in your state. And that's what we're all about here on this Everything's Cleaner in Texas podcast. So, Ron, Dusty, great conversations today. Really appreciate you both coming in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hank. Thanks for having us.
Good to see you guys.
All right, well, like we remind you each and every week at Beyond Clean, thanks for tuning in to this special chapter podcast of the Houston Sterile Processing chapter down there. And until we talk to you again next time, keep fighting dirty. All right, if you loved today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review because this fight against bioburden is as big as Texas. If you've got a sterile processing tip, story, or even product that's making it easier for Texas clean freaks to fight dirty, we want to hear about it. Connect with us on social media anywhere you find Beyond Clean. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. Until next time, lasso up those dirty trays and saddle up those sterilizers because we're about to show the world why everything's cleaner in Texas.